Welcome to the Free Flowing Health Podcast, where we invite you to embark on a transformative journey towards a healthier, happier, more fulfilling life. Each episode brings you a dynamic exploration of the diverse aspects of health, wellness, and healing. I'm your host, Lisa Brown. Join me as I engage in intimate conversations with inspirational guests who share their unique stories and insights. These conversations will take you beyond conventional thinking, encouraging you to break free from the constraints of a one-size-fits-all healing approach. Our mission is to empower you with the knowledge, tools, and motivation needed to inspire real change. Are you ready? Let's dive in. Back, everyone, to the Free Flowing Health Podcast. I say it every week, but today I have an amazing guest. She's only 23 years old, but wise in age. She's an old soul. She's a business coach and professional. She's the youngest professor at her institution that she teaches at. She has a wide variety of skill sets, so much expertise to offer to the world. She's fucking hilarious. We shared many nights together when we met last summer, working in the Berkshires, just really, having a great time. She was my comedic relief, but she's really intelligent, really courageous. And I want to welcome Lexi Cuff to the show. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm amazing, and I'm so happy to have this conversation with you. I can't wait to dive into your story and for you to share with the world all of your amazing insights. So I would love for you to begin just giving us a backstory. I know you're 20 years young, 23 years young. So just take us back to the beginning. Tell us a little bit about how you ended up where you are today, as much as you feel comfortable sharing.
Okay. So I grew up in New Jersey, oddly enough. I don't sound like it. I mean, I say some words weirdly, like water, or like it's weird. I'm weird. But I grew up, my parents are born and raised in New Jersey. They never wanted to leave, but they were up for this adventure. I kind of moved down south. I went to North Carolina for school, and then I wound up in Texas. So when I was in New Jersey, they really enriched in me and instilled that your education will take you far. If you drop out, you're not going to succeed to the same level you would if you stayed and you pushed yourself. So pushing myself to be the best has always been my number one. And that kind of had a detour when I was in third grade and I was diagnosed with a reading comprehension issue. It wound up obviously coming out as dyslexia. And when I reached fifth grade, I had a science teacher at my Catholic school tell me that I was not going to amount to anything. She point blank told my parents that I wasn't going to get to college. And when you have that mindset, fifth grade, I was 9 years old, about to be 10, telling me I'm not going to get to college. And ever since I was 4, it's always been, what college are we going to? Like, let's look at colleges. College was always pushed on me. And to be told in fifth grade that I wasn't going to go to college because I had a reading disability, that like really upset me. And it's not like the teacher just said it to my parent. She said it in front of me at the student parent conference. And I was almost like, okay. So I was really upset. My mom's like, don't listen to her. My dad essentially was like, F you. Because he can't bite his tongue on it. And we went back and forth. I was really upset with it. And my parents were financially in a place where they were able to afford tutors. I'm very grateful for that because I don't think I'd be where I am without their support and them pushing themselves at work to provide me with tutors. And my tutor was actually my first grade teacher, Miss McCoy. She was wonderful. She would spend hours with me every day. My parents even signed me up to be pulled out of class to work with me on it. And it paid off in the long run. I didn't stay at the Catholic school past 8th grade because we had Superstorm Sandy, which actually hit, and all of our houses were kind of white. If you were in a flood zone, you were evacuated. So during that time, I was about to be 12. So I was 11 turning 12. And it was a really hard time. That's when my family like really came together, my mom and my dad. They put aside like their differences and they were just able, we all stayed in a hotel room together during those 3 weeks. Like school was shut down. We couldn't do anything. And my parents were just there for us. And I say us, but it's just me. I'm an only child. So it's pretty neat that I was able to enjoy that. We watched the weirdest movie, What About Bob? It's my favorite movie though. It's
I've
such
never
a
seen it.
comedic relief. You'd love it. You'd love it. It's got Bill Murray in it. This man is a hoot. He's an absolute hoot, and it brings so much joy, and it takes away. The winds were so high that we just kept raising the volume on the TV, so I wouldn't have to listen to the winds outside because we were right on the shore. So it's like you would hear the ocean nearby, even though you're miles away. And it just gave me that sense of being, and it calmed me down. So that's what I always take from it, that I'm calm with my parents. And when I grew up and we were talking about colleges later on in life, they're like, you need to get out of New Jersey. We don't want you here. And it wasn't like they didn't want me to be home, like nothing like that. They're like, there's so much more than being in your hometown, being in your state. You need to experience other cultures, other people. Because if I'm not going to break out of my shell. I'm not going to be free. I'm not going to have this entire mentality behind me. And it really set the pace. So I went to school in New York. I didn't like it. I didn't like it. School wasn't a good fit. Then I transferred to North Carolina, and North Carolina instantly felt welcoming. It felt like home away from home. And I was there for 3 years, graduated early, came out with a communication degree. Business law was my minor. I loved it. I was like, okay, I graduated early. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to focus my next 9 months on traveling. And traveling led me on a cruise. It led me to South Carolina a few times. At some point, I was like, oh, I'm going to live in South Carolina. No, thank you. The cost of inflation is wild enough, let alone tourist towns. And then I wound up taking a job in Massachusetts in the Berkshires for the summer, and they offered me a full time in Texas. So I was an office manager up in Massachusetts, came down to Texas at the end of the summer, and it was great. I loved it. It was fun. Obviously, when you love it too much, it may be a burnout at some point. And that's kind of what I experienced. Burnouts are typical, but it takes a toll on us mentally, especially if we don't feel like we're getting the resources that we need or that we think we deserve. And that's kind of what I experienced. So when I came up year 2 to Massachusetts to work in the summer again, because it was a 4 month and 8 month, so 8 months in Texas, 4 months in Massachusetts. When I was there last summer, it was a great experience. I met some great people. I met you. I met a few of my good friends too, but it almost took a toll where I was weighing my pros and cons because I wasn't mentally stable there. I wound up being like diagnosed with anxiety because of how stressful of an environment I was at times. And if you overwhelm yourself so much, it takes away from you. Like you have to create boundaries, and boundaries are huge to me. And they became more important as time went on. So I had to really establish who was in my circle, who wasn't in my circle, the boundaries I needed to create. Fast forward to October of 2023, and I'm sitting there at a leg lock, essentially. I needed certain things that I knew that the company wasn't able to provide to me. I wanted to finish my master's degree, and I, like many people, don't qualify for FAFSA. And I'm not about to, in my mind at least, owe the government more money, because I'm kind of like, we're trillions of dollars in debt and you would let me borrow money from you. No, thank you. No, thank you. I also think it's quite hilarious that we're $1 trillion of debt and they want to give me a credit score. No, no. So I'm sitting there and I'm on a conference call and I was like, I really feel like I deserve a raise. And they did not feel the same way. And when you sit there and you're like, you don't feel the same way, it's almost a shell shock because you've invested so much of yourself into an organization. And yeah, I may have only been with them for almost 2 years, but it's still 2 years of my life. You've seen what I've been able to provide to you. Why am I not worth the investment? And they weren't able to give that to me. So I had to go seek elsewhere to be able to provide that. It started off as the concept of an internship to kind of get a feeler for the profession. And they wound up offering me a full-time position. They're like, you're too good that we can't let you go. What can we do to make it worth your while? And here we are. It was fun. I loved my first few mods teaching. And when they came to me and they're like, we want you full time. What can we do to make it happen? And that was a time where I had a lot of health scares. I had a tumor removed, and the tumor wound up being benign, which means it's not cancerous, thank God. But during that time, they had to test for cancer. They're still testing for cancer. It's almost like all of these things happened at once that I'm grateful that I was able to have an organization that thought of me, that thought I was worth an investment. And I'm 23. They didn't know what they were going to get with me, but they were able to take that risk and it's paid off for them. I'm right now in the business program. It's not struggling, but you've got students who don't do mentally well online. And a lot of classes are online because it's such a rigorous pace. Like there are 3-week sessions, and the 3-week sessions, you need to get to connect with your students. You need to make that interaction happen. You need to support them. I've got one class that we have 21 assignments due in 3 weeks.
Holy moly.
21. Like that's crazy. I wouldn't have been able to survive. But my students are getting it done because we're doing it together step by step, and they're trusting me and I'm trusting them. So it's a huge commitment. But right now I've taught almost 512 students. And those 512 students that I've taught since October, like they're thriving. And I love that for them. It's obvious in America, like when it comes about January to April, it's called tax season. What better time to take an accounting or a math class than in that time? And you bet your butt, I've taught 3 math classes in that time. And my one thing that I love is if you've ever been enrolled in an education or a higher education system in the tax season, you're automatically eligible for the American Lifetime Opportunity Act. So you're able to put down for your education, your expenses, and you're only allowed it once in a lifetime, but it's still $1,063 that you're just supposed to get. And not many people know that.
I've never even heard of that.
Yeah, and I was like, I tell my students all the time, I was like, put down how much tuition you pay because you are entitled to that money back. Don't let Uncle Sam tell you differently. And like, even if you take CDL classes, if you're in a trade school, anything like that, it counts because you're spending your money. So if you're spending money, why not put that down?
Would you say that, your experience having persevered as a young child, being diagnosed or being labeled as dyslexic, now I sound dyslexic,
Yeah.
and overcoming that particular struggle or issue, and you never mentioned how you did it. I think you read something like 367 books in 1 year. You can jump into that story in just a moment. So, that being young, relatable, approachable, somebody who has accomplished a lot at a young age, do you think that influences the way that the students interact with you and trust you and, are able to learn? So you can answer that question after, but first take us back to when you did get that diagnosis, what your response was like at a young age of 12 years old or whatever you were, and then how you chose to respond, whereas maybe other people who are very susceptible to other people's opinions as young children, they're vulnerable and they're being conditioned, might have taken a different path or developed a different mindset, and maybe not pursued a higher education or put in the work that you put in order to overcome the issue. Also, it sounds like you had really supportive parents. That's amazing. Not everybody has that. So if you could just walk us through that before we come back to current day.
Yeah. So oddly enough, we joke in my family that my dad is dyslexic too. I don't think he's diagnosed, but you can definitely tell the similarities. It was always stressful. Like my mom would work a lot of hours. My dad did too. But my dad would be able to pick me up from after school care, and that was at the elementary school that I went to. He would pick me up, and I was supposed to be doing homework with him at the kitchen counter. And if you've ever been in that predicament where you're supposed to be doing homework with your dad and your dad's getting frustrated by you getting frustrated, it is a recipe for disaster. I remember sitting at his table and it had like the little grinds in it because it was like tiled and had the tile tabletop. And I just remember like running my finger through it one day. He's like, can you stop? Like, can you stop? Like, do your homework. And I was like, you don't have to yell at me. Like, I'm just trying. And he's like, you're not doing your homework. And we're going back and forth on it. And I don't wind up doing it. I wind up having to wait for my mom to come pick me up from his house. My mom and I get back to her house and she's like, well, what do you have for homework? I was like, well, daddy yelled at me. And I really I just don't understand it. It was such a comprehension issue. Like writing for me was so stressful. Being able to understand a word problem. I could see the numbers, I would get the solution. I just couldn't read the problem. I would have to have someone read it to me for me to understand it. And being diagnosed that young, it was almost like a game in a way, because you don't know what's going on. Like, you know, you're being tested for something, but you don't know what they're testing you for. And in the testing center, it was a lot of puzzle pieces. It was a lot of them like mapping out your skills, mapping out how you respond to things. And if you don't respond fast enough, they mark you. And it was almost like I was being observed by 6 different people. And Mr. L, who was one of the therapists that was testing me on something, he was like, "Do you understand what we're doing?" I said, "No, I don't. But I also know you're testing me." And I was cognizant enough to know that he was testing me on it, but I didn't know why I was being tested, because my parents didn't tell me why I was being tested. They just said it was supposed to help me. And it came out that I needed additional support and additional tutoring. I would get pulled out of reading class, 3rd grade, 4th grade, and 5th grade with my friends. And I didn't know that they had reading problems either, but we'd be taken to a trailer at the back of the school, and we'd have one-on-one sessions with a speech therapist and a reading therapist. And that's what kind of solidified that I have a real reading issue. And that's when my parents reached out to my 1st grade teacher, we had a great connection, Miss McCoy and I. She was able to work with me in class and then at her home. And with her support, I was able to conquer any reading. Like, I went from having C's to A's.
Wow.
And I never had a C before 5th grade. 5th grade was my first year I ever received a C on any report card. And that's what threw my parents into over a year. Because that's the same teacher that said it's not like she's going to go to college. And my mom's like,
Shame on
"She's
that
never
teacher,
gotten a C
first and
before. She went from
foremost.
straight A's." Yes. And she's not even with the school anymore. I was like, of course she's not. But it was a school that was so heavily based on religion. It was a Catholic school. And she straight up told my teachers, or she straight up told my parents that. And you look at it and you're like, she saw something that wasn't there. But I knew it wasn't there either, because she was just seeing things that she wanted to see. She wanted to see signs. And she wanted to be able to tell my parents, "Well, it's your daughter's fault she's getting a C." Well, my parents both knew that I was getting A's and B's. The year prior in 4th grade, I never got below an A. So that tells you there's a disconnect in my education somewhere. So I'm going from straight A's, now I'm getting C's. Where's my issue? My math teacher was the one who actually told my mom that she's struggling with the symbols, which is a sign of dyslexia. And my mom's like, "Yeah, but like, she's been tested, she has a reading comprehension." And she's like, "No, like the signs that she's seeing, like we were talking about exponents, we were talking about multiplication." She was like, "She's seeing the exponent," because exponents are typically like the letter X. She's seeing the exponent as a multiplication symbol. She's not seeing it at the size she needs to. And she's saying that an S is a 5. And it was like little symbols like that that keyed my parents into what was going on. And my dad always joked that he was dyslexic. He has ADHD. And unfortunately, where I do not have ADHD, I joke that I do, but I don't, because I'm just a talkative person. But it really stemmed down to what was able to be seen and what I was being tested with. The classroom setting is different for everyone, and I think that's my challenge. My experience in Catholic school is different than people's experience in public school, but that's because I think a lot of it stems from almost the ego that comes with it. There's an ego complex when you know that your parents are able to afford something and you have this great education system that not many people have access to. Because right now, I'll tell you, like, if I have children, I'm not going to be able to afford that, because it was like $9,000 a year that my parents sent me to, something like that. That's an insane amount of money. And I was fortunate to have it. I was fortunate my parents were able to provide that to me. But it's a blessing not many people have access to. It's not realistic nowadays. So not only were they able to pay for that, they were paying for tutoring on top of it. They paid for the testing, because testing wasn't free.
Right.
And they don't, like, not many people know that the testing's not free when it comes to your education. And I wound up going and I got an IEP, and the IEP in some ways it helped, but it also made me really like self-conscious with it, because
What's
what
an
if people judge me
IEP
for
for
it?
those who don't know?
It's an individualized education plan, and it's supposed to outline to the schools that you attend what you need, what resources you need access to. So a lot of the times I would need to be placed in the front of a classroom. So like say they were rows, I need to be in the front row or the second row because I'm not going to focus in the back row. I'm not going to be able to see the board, what's going on. Another thing I had on my IEP was I needed double the time. And that, like, if an exam was 40 minutes, I was given 80. It got to high school and it was 2.5 time on an exam. So I was given 40 plus 40 plus 20. So I was given 100 minutes on an exam because that's what I needed to be able to read it properly. It worked wonders on the SAT because I didn't have any time limit. It was an open time limit for me.
Sorry to interject, just a question. So is this something that stays with you throughout your entire life? I know you've gotten all of these, the help that you need, and, you know, had access to many different resources, but obviously now you're taking us into high school. So is this something that is a lifelong issue or struggle or challenge that you have to work at consistently, or have you seen such improvement that you do not consider yourself dyslexic anymore? Just school us on that so people can get an understanding of that.
I would say it's kind of both, really, because it's always going to stay with you. I know for the IEP aspect, you have to advocate for it late as the higher education goes on. So high school, it stays with you because it's government mandated. But when you get to college, it's up to you. If you don't want to let the college know you have it, then you don't have to. But you also can't expect the same resources. And you have to go through testing as well in college for it. They have to analyze what your high school said, and then they have to analyze you. I sat down in quite a few classrooms being analyzed in college, and it wasn't until I went to the IEP program at the college, which is like the inclusivity division aspect at Western Carolina. And they were able to sit down with me and they spoke with me. They asked me questions. They asked me why I needed these resources, like what I was diagnosed with. And we went back and forth. It was like a 3-week process. And
Right.
they have to either deny you or approve you. And if you get denied, then you have to wait another semester. So the people that don't take precaution and don't advocate for themselves, it becomes a struggle for them. I took what the college and the high school gave me, and I had to, for my master's program, I had to submit that. And then I had to have phone conversations with the director and the dean of admissions to go over like what I needed. And they had to let me know, like, it'll be a process. I'll have to answer more questions. That wound up being about a month. So you really, it's all about you advocating for yourself. In the aspect of dyslexia going away, I don't think it'll ever go away, but I will say that you can train yourself to not outgrow it, but you can train yourself to be better with it. For myself, blue paper works wonders. It takes the staring of white paper out of your content, like out of your vision, and you're focused on the word as a whole rather than what's going on around that word. Because if I can just focus on the letters, then I'm able to read it. And what I do now actually is, you mentioned my lovely 2016 goal of reading a book a day, and 2016 was actually a leap year. So we had an extra day going on. So it was actually 366. And my goal that year was to read a book a day. And I thought in my head, if I can do that, then I can get to college and I can be successful in college because I know I'm going to be able to read the textbooks that the professors are going to give me. I wound up doing it, and it was one of the best, and I give credit to it all the time. I don't think I would have been successful in college had I not done that. And it was where a point in my life where I absolutely hated going home at night. And it wasn't like nothing happened at home, but I'm an only child, and all of my friends had siblings. So all of my friends were able to hang out with their siblings at home. And my mom and I, like, we lived in a beach town, like we lived right on the shore. So what am I going to do going home to a 3-bed, 1-bath? And my mom's not going to get home till 8 o'clock at night. School gets out at 2:15. What am I going to do? Well, I would walk myself because my high school was diagonally down the road, like maybe like 0.5 miles away from the library. I would walk to the library after school and I would sit there, do homework. I used to tutor children at the library and I'd read a book. And reading a book, I was able to see like the disconnect that I was facing. There are some books that I've read multiple times because I just don't understand the plot. I don't understand the character development. I don't like, there's so many things I didn't understand, but I would reread it to make sure I understood. And to this day, last year, I finished on Goodreads with like 170 something books that I read. Right now, I'm at
Whoa.
18 books that have been read. yeah, like I need to keep up with it because if I don't, then like I start like the stuttering aspect, I start like not comprehending. It's something you have to work at time and time again. And in my classroom, a lot of classes, unfortunately, like are online. A lot of our homework aspects are online because it's easier for us to grade. They submit it online through the forum, and then I print it out and I make notes and then I hand it to them physically. I was like, these are the changes you should make. You don't want to make them, that's fine. Let me know. And a lot of my students have come back, be like, why are you highlighting? Why are you using sticky notes? Because that's what stands out to me. That's what helps me as an educator, but also helps me with someone who has dyslexia. Because taking it off a paper and putting it towards the side, like on a sticky note, isolating the word, isolating what's going on, really helps me and makes me realize like this is what I need to focus on. This is what's being happened. This is what's happening. This is what needs to be done. So it's one of those things where it starts out really terrifying because like you feel really insecure with it. And college was that one thing too. I felt insecure with it. I had one class that I had to retake actually because I didn't tell the professor in time that I had an IEP and he wouldn't oblige to the IEP enough. And then I wound up retaking the class. I took that as a sophomore, I took it again as a senior, and I passed with flying colors. I got an A, I got a 96. Where sophomore year me, who was insecure and didn't want to let him know I had an IEP, got like a 70 something. There's two different, like I knew what I was capable of, and I did not want to let my insecurities take the best of me and make my GPA drop. So I asked to retake the class. I got approved to retake it. But really, you have to put the effort in because if you don't advocate for yourself, no one else is going to.
Yes, your need to want to work on personal development and grow, is just unmatchable. And
Mhm.
I'm sure that your early life experiences kind of shaped the path to where you are professionally. Obviously, having chose this leadership role where you're in education and putting yourself out there in such a big way, and I don't know if you also have come into contact with students dealing with similar issues or if you're open with them and or if it's just something that you deal with internally and work at behind the scenes.
So I have a little bit of both, honestly. I have my age range of students is from 18 to 63. So my oldest student that I've had in my course is 63 years old. He is such a delight. But I also have veterans in my courses too. So a lot of the VA pays for their soldiers to come back. And day one of class, when we do our introductions, I almost do like an interview style where they interview each other to get to know one another. They interview me, I interview them, and I let them know from the jump that if they don't advocate for themselves, no one else is going to. I said, I'm your biggest resource in this classroom, but I need you to be a resource for yourself. And I always share with them that the reason I pride myself on being open and positive is because growing up, I had dyslexia. I still have dyslexia. And it doesn't go away, but unless you force yourself to want something for yourself, you're not going to get it. And I have a student, or I've had students in the past who they may not know English that well. I've had a few that reading to them it's not up to par for what it should be in higher education. We do the basics. We teach nouns, verbs, adjectives. Like we're reteaching some students because they don't comprehend it. And I think that's the disconnect because you can't keep pushing people forward in the system, in the education system, if they're not eligible to be pushed up. And I'm considered one of the tough professors here. But I'm not going to give you a grade if you don't deserve a grade. If you don't show up to my class, you're not getting participation.
Do you think
If
growing up in
you
a family that taught self-love has something to do with that?
I definitely think so. I think it's holding yourself accountable too, because there was no if, ands, or buts growing up in my household. Like if I could make an excuse, my parents would see right through me. I'm also a terrible liar, so it doesn't work in my interest. Um, but like when you have those things and you have those resources that hold you accountable, I'll tell you right now, my parents still call me out on my BS to this day. Even my mom in a rehab, she calls me out. Like she, she was like, you need to act better. She's like, you need to go take your dog on a walk. Like, how are you going to get him fresh air if you don't go take him out on a walk? I was like, well, he can go in the backyard. She's like, that's not good for him. She calls me out on the phone. My dad will do the same thing. And they hold me accountable 2,000 miles away. So the students that aren't held accountable at home, you best believe you'll be held accountable in the classroom, because I'm going to support you and I'm going to support you to the best of your ability. And that's going to start with knowing what you need to do. I've got like the 18 to 63-year-olds. It can be at times an ego conflict. I've got some students who really don't like the fact that I'm young. I've had 19-year-old students who have commented on, well, I'm not going to listen to her. She's only 4 years older than me. Right. So, but when you were 15, I was 19 and I was a year and a half away from graduating from college. So let me put it in retrospect. I'm only 4 years older than you, yes, but I'm able to help you. I'm willing to help you. Let me help you. Like, my age does not determine if I can or cannot help you. And that's another thing like we face, like the 63-year-old that I have in my class. What a beautiful person, because he just continuously asks questions. He's so intuitive. He wants to know. And that's what's so important, is if you don't ask, you're not going to know the answer.
Right. Well, I think it's amazing that you hold true to who you are. You're a person of integrity, and that you're practicing what you preach and what you've learned. And it's doing the students a service rather than a disservice, like your past teacher did by saying you're not going to amount to anything, you're not going to make it to college. So I think it's awesome, your approach. Do you want to talk a little bit now about financial wealth and mindset, and anything in that area of expertise that you think would be valuable for our listeners?
Yes, welcome to tax season, by the way. It is tax season in the USA. I am a full believer that taxes cause us the most stress nowadays. It's just so worrisome that we have this issue going on. And it can be seen as such a negative when it's really such a positive. My one thing with finances is, if you don't budget and you don't know what you have, then you overspend. And if you're overspending, then that causes you more stress, because now you're worrying how you're going to pay for your next bill, how you're going to do this, how you're going to do that. And that's where financial management really comes into play. If you cannot financially manage yourself, you can't manage your emotions, you can't imagine, or you can't manage your self-esteem. There's so many things you cannot manage if finances are not in order first. And that's a big thing. Oddly enough, the day we have January 20th, that is when my taxes are always filed. I will always be a January 20th file gal. And I always get my finances February 6th. I have had my tax return in my bank account by February 6th. When I do it that way, I make sure everything's in order. So your companies are always supposed to give you your W-2s by January 31st. Most companies do it ahead of time. Nowadays, we're online, so you should get an email about the second or third week of January. And I just input it. I save it to my phone and I make sure it's accessible. And I'm fortunate where my phone and my laptop are synced. So if they're synced, I have access to both of them on both devices. When I do it that way, it gives me relief, because now I'm not worried about it. I think when we have finances as well, and we don't know, some people don't know how to file taxes. And that's such a struggle, because they don't teach it in high school. I know I joke all the time with my friends. I'm like, I'm so glad we learned the Pythagorean theorem instead of learning how to do taxes and what a credit score is and about loans. And I've got students in my classes, I teach business math as well here. And my business math students, they have no idea about taxes. They have no idea about deductions, no idea, like, if they're in school, that they can be approved for like the Lifetime Education Act. They don't know these things because it's not taught to them. And if it's not taught to them, how are they going to learn it? Because they're not just going to go seek out information on their own. They need to have that understanding, like, it's available. How do I get access to it? And
Right.
having access to it, if you're not familiar with it, you can go your entire life without knowing.
So you hit the nail on the head when you said that it could be one of the most stressful seasons for a lot of people who don't know how to manage their money or budget or plan or have any control or knowledge about what's happening with their money in and money out. And that is especially true, I think, for new business owners, for small business owners like myself. We were having this conversation prior to hitting the record button about, despite me being in business for quite a few years, it's one of the most difficult things on my path is to deal with my finances and to keep track of my deductions and just even figure out what to put into the spreadsheet. But obviously, I believe in a growth mindset, and I believe that we can learn anything if we apply ourselves. And this is why I love interviewing people like you have such a easygoing perspective and, so much experience in that area that you can just, uplift people with the words that you speak and, simplify it. So what kind of advice would you give to somebody like me who's, much older than you and who has been in business for many years, or anybody who's looking to embark on a new journey but might be fearful because they have no idea where to start, what to do? Should I create an LLC? Should I become a sole prop? What can I write off? How do I record whatever it is that I'm doing? Like, if we can just take it to the very inception of somebody embarking on their journey as a new business owner, um, what advice would you give to them?
Yeah. So any new business, you want to definitely think ahead of time if you're going into business or want to go into business, as if you're going to be a sole proprietor or if you're going to be an LLC. LLC gives you tax write-off of capabilities, and it may not use your personal social, which is the plus. If you're a sole proprietor, your social is a part of the IRS's database for a business. So you may be susceptible to double tax.
Oh,
And
shit.
that's where it could kill you. Yeah, that's where it could kill you. Especially if you
That's what I
don't,
am. That's what I am. I might have to switch it up after our conversation today, but please continue.
you just need to be mindful of like what you spent. And I have to say, like, if anything benefits your company that you have, then it's a tax write-off. So if you buy a new car and it's for business expenses, tax write-off, and you're only allowed to do it once, like once. So one car that you buy can only be done the year you buy it. You can't keep putting it on your next tax return in the year after that and the year after that. So if you buy the car in 2023, you're able to use it as a tax write-off for 2023. You're not able to do it for 2024, 2025, 2026, only the year you buy it. Um, if you're putting money of yours into the business and you don't want to keep receipts, take a photo of the receipt. That's what I do. Um, outside of the classroom, I am a 1099, so I'm also a contracted tutor. And by being a tutor, I work with 4 different families. And the 4 different families I work with, 2 of them are through an agency and 2 of them are on my own. So I've created contracts with those families, and the 2 that I have with an agency, those are 1099s, and then the other 2, I just submit to the IRS. I'm decent enough where I do it that way. I give the families invoices for that, and I create my own invoice. So if you're a sole proprietor, you're creating your own invoices. LLC, you may have a management company that makes it for you, or you may have a CPA that does it for you. The nice thing about CPAs is that they're supposed to be organized, they're supposed to help you. The one downfall to it is they're an expense out of pocket that not many people can afford if you are funding it yourself. CPAs can average anywhere from 6 grand a year up to 15, depending on the longevity, depending on how much you access them. They also may have an hourly rate too that we don't think often about. So it really depends on your situation, on your business. An LLC too, you're all LLC and sole proprietor are maybe both required to do federal regulations, just like Walmart or Target. You may be susceptible to the same corporation taxes and changes that go on, and not many people know that. Just because it's a boutique, doesn't mean it has to have different rules and regulations than Walmart. There are regulations in place, and that could be a local regulation, a state regulation, or a federal one. You have to abide by it, and if you don't, you may get fined. And the weird thing about this tax season coming up, not this one that we just are in, but the one for next year, is if you don't register your LLC, you may get fined monthly.
Oh,
So
wow.
if you're not taking the precautions, right? If you're not taking the precautions, the IRS may be able to audit you. And one thing about the IRS, they're going to get their money.
And didn't the government hire something like 70,000 IRS agents to go out there and, get
Yeah,
people?
it's almost as bad as like walking into a bar and the DEA is there. It's going to be severe this year, especially if you're not registered properly, you're not inputting the right data, because if you're not doing it, they'll find you. I
What is
have
a good
full faith.
way? Do you recommend like a particular software? Can somebody do it old school? Do they just use a simple spreadsheet? And let's just talk about maybe a few different deduction categories that people might not think of that can span across multiple businesses so that the ideas can be planted in people's heads that, okay, maybe I should begin looking at this and, this is an expense and so forth and so on.
Yeah, definitely. Expense wise, home deductions. If you have a home office, if you are based out of your house for majority of things, that's your number one best friend for tax season. I know for myself, I prepare a lot of my material for my lectures at home, and then I bring them to the classroom. When I prep for tutoring, I do it in my home office, and it's just a space. It could be a desk, it can be a tiny area in the household. Anything that you deem as a home office, that's able to be applied to your deductions. And what I do is I calculate how often I use the Wi-Fi, and I do that through a spreadsheet. So if I'm in my office maybe 3 hours a week, well, how many hours a week are there? So then you multiply 24 hours by 7, find it. How many hours was I in the office? Then I'll do my division. It's a formula that you just create. And in my spreadsheet, I'm able to make sure I'm accounting for everything. So the Wi-Fi, the electricity, what was my electricity bill this month? How often was I in the room? Okay, let me deduct. Let me make sure I'm going to get credit for that come tax season. If you are traveling to people, if you put a cap or if you reimburse yourself for miles per hour, okay, well, how many cents are you giving yourself for miles? Well, you need to make sure that you're putting that on your spreadsheet. You should have categories. You should have like the home office, you should have electricity, you should have Wi-Fi, you should have travel expenses. If you're meeting clients and you're having meetings, are you paying for hotels? Do you have documentation of hotels? Are you paying for food? Do you have a credit card for your company? Do you have an employer identification number? Do you have an EIN from what the IRS requests? All these things you need to take into consideration. And if you're making a big expense or in a big purchase in that tax season, that should be your number one thing on that spreadsheet. How much is it costing? If you have a car associated with your business, well, now you also have insurance. What kind of insurance do you have? What's your liability? All of these things should be taken into consideration, and that's a deduction. That is the best deduction out there. Another thing is if you are enrolled in anything that will better your business, any education program, any seminar, that's able to be deducted too. If you have any new trainings, anything education, it's a great write-off. I'm trying to think, there's one more that's a great incentive. It's under, let's see, it's
Right. We have home
supposed to
office, we
be,
have travel, we have mileage reimbursement, we have
if you,
continuing education.
and the last one is if you have any employee that is a service member. If you have anyone that works for you and they are either a disabled veteran or they are a veteran, they're under the Minority Act. And actually, as a business owner, you're able to file quite a bit of money as a deduction for them. In the state of Texas alone, like having an employee who is a disabled veteran, at least by 75%, they may have been discharged because of medical reason, anything along those lines. That's almost a $9,600 deduction that they're able to claim for one person.
Wow,
One
that's new
person.
news to
That is
me.
crazy.
What about advertising, marketing, monthly subscriptions related to your business? You've got to pay for website maintenance.
Website maintenance is 100%. That can be
Hmm.
under other. So there's a
Hmm.
category with filing, it's under other. Marketing and strategic planning, that can be considered both. So you just want to make sure that you're accounting for both pricing. If you're paying, like I know for myself for my website, I pay $12.99 a month. So I just multiply that by however many months I've had the website open, and I'm able to put that on my tax return. So you're able
What
to do
about
those things. Your cell phone, yes, absolutely. As long as you're having logs and you're able to, I know for myself, I have T-Mobile. I'm able to just upload if I need to, the phone bill. And you may be, as long as 50% or more of your time is on the phone is used, you're able to qualify that.
okay, cool. Anything else you can think of that would be useful for people to know?
Gas. You're able to As long as you have gas receipts, that is an expense. It's a business expense. If you're keeping track of your mileages, that's a business expense. If you're going on a trip to better your company, say like you're in Florida. Say you're in Miami and you want to go to Tampa for a conference, that's a business trip. That's a deduction. That is something that you can claim as long as your time there is spent on business. Not the entire time, obviously, but the time that's accounted for. That is going to be able to help you on tax season.
And I know you said that, there's a lot of old school people who collect like boxes of receipts. I happen to be one of those people, but with modern technology, it's possible to take pictures of receipts and there's all sorts of apps available. But what is the simplest and most straightforward way or recommendation that you have for people to record all of this information?
The best thing about technology nowadays is your bank account does it for you.
Oh,
So
yeah.
if you know, if you know where you are, what you've spent, and say you throw away that receipt for some reason, you're able to take a screenshot on your phone of your bank account and you're able just to have it. I'm weird enough where anything I do for my dog, oddly enough, he has an entire folder in my phone under the pictures, and it's all of his medical expenses. So everything is accounted for on my phone. Gosh forbid, like anything happens to him, like I know immediately I've got access to it. You can also go ahead and make it a folder in your emails if you sign up for things to be sent to you through email. A lot of stores nowadays, you can either get a printed receipt or an emailed receipt. Walmart, especially, they'll email it to you. So if it's anything business related, if you're buying pans, you're buying pens, anything like that, you can have it emailed to you through Walmart, and you can just keep track of it that way. The dates are huge too because they want to see that the date aligns with the time that you're trying to file taxes for. So
Is that called reconciliation or something like that?
yeah, it's under that. Yeah.
And what is the likelihood that somebody would get audited by the IRS, and what would create a flag or create a reason for the IRS to audit somebody?
If it's a high number, so if anything's cost related, it's over expenses. If it's anywhere $600 and under, it's not going to be questioned. If it's 600 and more, you have to show proof. And if you can't show proof, they're going to ask why you can't show proof. Say an employer has an employee go buy material. So say you're a chef, say your employer has you go, or your contracted individual has you go buy groceries for them. Okay, well, you're going to buy groceries. Are you putting it on their card or your card?
iCard.
Your card. So now they have to pay you the expense of
Yeah.
those groceries. Are they going to pay it cash or are they going to pay it through check? If they pay it through check, that's going to be where you have to file it. If they pay it through cash, you may not have to file it. You may just put it on an invoice as duty. So there's so many elements to it. But the one thing with being in an industry and being like your own boss and having your own business is there's so many expenses that not many people actually qualify. That the IRS having their audits, if money doesn't make sense to them, they're going to have a severe issue with it. If you are if you're making more money significantly this year than last year, they're going to raise an eyebrow. They're going to audit last year's taxes. If you're not paying, if you have a home, if you're not paying your mortgage or you're not paying things on time, they're going to look at how can you afford this, but you're not affording that. You're not affording your bills. It's a lot of things. And unfortunately, your social security number is connected to everything. And that's where it can eat you. If you're not paying things from social, if you're going to collections for things, going to collections for things can kill you too, can kill your social security number. But if you're telling the IRS something and it can't be backed up, IRS is going to look at you and be like, we're not stupid. They have so many people who are extremely intelligent at disposal. So they're going to use those people. They're going to get their money's worth. You best believe that. They are going to get their money's worth. And if you're not accurate and you lie on your taxes, they'll find you. And they may not find you this year. They may not find you next year, but they will find and they'll take 2025's taxes from you for withhold. They'll
I
withhold
hope
it
that
without an
everybody
issue.
listening to this will take your words to heart, and if nothing else, really keep great track of their finances, especially those in business for themselves, because it's a little bit more difficult when it comes to, okay, I'm not just getting this W-2 and writing in the numbers.
Oh.
So I think it's really important. In what capacity do you coach people or work with people one-on-one? I know you're a tutor. I know you work, obviously in the educational system and you keep yourself really busy pursuing higher education, but do you also offer one-on-one business coaching? Because I'm sure that myself as well as many people out there could use some guidance so that they step into their newest path with armed with knowledge and information so that they don't get themselves in trouble.
Yes, I do. So I love just giving as much knowledge as I can collect. I've helped so many people this tax season get their taxes. Actually, in our development that we live in, we just moved in September. The development we live in, a lot of people go in the group chat, like, who's a CPA? Who knows how to do taxes? I can't tell you how many of my neighbors I've helped with their taxes. Like, I read our HOA guidelines because we live in an HOA. It's hard not to live in an HOA nowadays. Um, I read our HOA guidelines, and a lot of our neighbors have solar panels. I was like, did you file for deduction? Because if you have solar panels, that's the solar credit. Like, you're able to file for that. I'm like, no. I was like, yeah, like, get your money's worth. Oddly enough, a lot of people can qualify for up to like $13,000 for the credit. Like, that's crazy. Like, you're gonna get $13,000 back for having solar panels. Why wouldn't you? I have a lot of people who childcare, if you've got children, what an expense that is. If they're in summer camp, you're able to file that. If they're at daycare, you're able to file that. Childcare expenses is the number one that helps a lot of moms and dads or legal guardians, because some people have that case. It's such a stress relief because you get money back and it's going to help you for those next few months, especially with children because they're so expensive as it is. If you have low income housing, that's able to be looked at for assistance. Anything that helps you throughout the school year or throughout the year as a whole is able to be deducted at some rate. And that's kind of where it lies in what you take account for and what you remember. And that's why it's so crucial to look through your bank statements, because some people may double charge you for things. And if you're not on top of your finances in that regard, you're not going to know. That's a spreadsheet is my best friend. I use a spreadsheet for Christmas presents too. It's weird. But I put people's names, the present, and how much I spend on them. That way I'm keeping myself accountable for what I spend. Um, Presents can't be a tax write-off. I wish they could. They can't. But a lot of things can be a tax write-off. You just have to know how to field it. So I've done quite a few of my students actually in my business classes. We've done their taxes together. So I've done one-on-ones with them. I have done one-on-one accounting with students outside of the classroom. My neighborhood I help with. I'm also great with being with business communication and teaching the intro to business law. I love business law. My mom was a lawyer and she was able to instill in me some great feedback, some great information. And I just love sharing that aspect of it because you never think that crime can happen, especially as a sole proprietor if you own your own business. Identity theft and business theft is so real because they'll take your likeness, they'll take your image, they'll take your branding. And that's when that becomes an issue because what you've worked so hard for, someone just stole. They just stole all
It
your
sounds
hard
like
work, and it happens to
that's
all businesses.
that sounds like a whole nother episode because I know I'm going to have you on a future date so that we can like dive deep into a specific topic. I definitely want to be like you when I grow up and get my finances in order. There's a lot of people who procrastinate. They don't want to open the bills. They don't want to look at their statements. Like everything is just piling up. It's overwhelming. They're living in fear. Maybe they're, drinking their nights away just so they don't have to deal with this. And I know everybody's situation and background is different, but if there was one piece of advice that you can give to anybody living in this state of fear, feeling that overwhelm, where can they start just to begin to take control over their situation? Does it begin with a mindset? Does it begin with awareness and just identifying that perhaps maybe they have a problem and then creating a action plan? Where can people begin? What is your number one tip for a generalized tip for people struggling in this area?
I definitely think it's starting with you as a person. Being able to communicate with yourself is where we all fall short. Whether it's because we don't want to face the reality, we don't want to look ourselves in the mirror, or we struggle with the concept that we are the issue. And I say that not to be mean by any means, but like I know for myself, when I went away to college, my mom became almost a hoarder in a way, where she filled her time where I wasn't in the household anymore. And she traveled, she moved in with grandma, she was taking care of grandma, and she filled that void of not having her child with shopping. And that became an expense on top of paying for college, that she had the finances readily available to her, but she could have done so much more with the money, but she chose to spend it because it was there and she didn't know how to manage her time. She didn't know how to fill that void of not having me there and being with her 24/7. So eventually she stopped being able to manage that aspect of her life. And now you look at it and you're like, okay, well, how much money has she saved by not being in the home state that we were in? And we look at those aspects and I'm kind of like, you spent all this money shopping and she buys the same thing over and over again. And she's like, yeah, like I can use it in the future. What if that one breaks? But what if it doesn't break? What if that's good for years? So now we have multiples and she's just preparing for the worst thing to happen. So by her having that mindset, it's taking away from this relief of finances, really. Once you become financially dependent on yourself and you can look at yourself in the mirror and be like, I'm comfortable with where I'm at, that's when you know you've made it. And a lot of it comes from, unfortunately, us being young, us being older, to really contemplate, like, what am I needing my money for? What do I want my money for? And a lot of us are struggling right now, at least financially, with the aspect of wanting to buy a home nowadays. I know a lot of people have student loans that they've taken out, and the student loans that they've taken out, those interest rates are god awful. And when you have such a high interest rate, not only for housing, but car market is astronomical to rent
I know.
or to
I
lease a
just
car.
purchased a car a month ago, so I know.
It's bad.
Horrendous.
But like, what was your interest rate? Was it like 4 to 7 or was it higher than 7?
It was it was higher than 7 because they cut me a deal on the car. My bank approved me for
Oh,
6.5. The dealership made me finance through them in order to get a deal. So in 3 months, I will go and refinance and get that lower rate because I have great credit and a great history. So, 3 months is 3 months to get a substantial amount off the car, but it's pretty insane. I mean, I remember car rates being like under 5%. So we'll see what I get in
yeah.
April when I go to refinance.
Yeah, it's definitely like, and that's the one thing, people don't refinance when they get a vehicle. And that's, to me, that's crazy. Why wouldn't you refinance if you can? It doesn't hurt you in the long run. It actually helps you. And also like debt consolidation. If you consolidate all your debt into one area and you just pay that monthly thing, that's one bill going to the debt collector, or that's one bill going to the credit bureaus. If you can do that, why wouldn't you do that? But with student loans, it's astronomical and people can't afford to make their loans. I saw something like on social media the other day and it was like, I'm sorry, I can't make my loans. You can take it up with Jesus. And it's like, okay, okay, yeah, we can take it up with him, I guess. But when we're already in this inflation rate, like living is already so expensive. Finding decent housing for your budget is already hard. And nowadays they're asking for 3 times the rent that you make. So if you are single, you have to make 3 times the rent to just live on your own. If you're with
And
a
you need five
significant other,
roommates to do it. And you need 5 roommates.
yes, yes, you need so many roommates to do it. If you're looking for a house nowadays, depending on the management company, you both have to make 3 times the rent. That's not possible in some areas. I know in cities it's very hard. Like the city of Austin, you cannot find a decent place for under 1,500. And if you do, that's a gem. And that's going to go fast. You're not going to have access to it right away. It's very difficult, but I think it starts with how you communicate with yourself and your needs and wants. It's all about needs and wants. And I like follow this model, the 50-30-20 with my paychecks. 50% of it needs to go to my household items, my necessities. 30% of it can go to my wants, and 20% has to go to my savings. Because if I'm not saving anything, what am I going to do the following week? So 50-30-20, it works wonders. It's helped so many people. And that's what you're able to see if you look at your checks and your accounts, what you can truly afford. Because if 50% of your check that you get home every week or every 2 weeks, or if it's monthly, if that does not cover your cost of living, you are living outside of your means. And
So
that's a
it boils
discussion that
down
you have to
to
face.
you have to communicate with yourself, but you have to lay it all out and see what it is you're dealing with. Like if you don't have
Mhm.
that awareness and you don't know where your money's going, where you're losing money, where you're in debt, then, you're never going to be able to like climb out of it. So, yeah. Um, the question that I like to ask all of my guests, since we're nearing the end of this episode, but I know I'm going to have you back on because this hour flew by and it's like unbelievable, is when you hear free flowing health, what does that mean to you? And you can relate it to anything in your life, just intuitively. What comes up for you when I say free flowing health?
I think two words, mental and friendship. Free flowing mentally is this idea to get outside of your own head because it's so hard for us like I know I'm an overthinker. So if I overthink so much, I psych myself out. And free flowing health means like I mentally need to take charge of my life. I need to stop overthinking. I need to stop doing this. I need to live outside. And if I can't live outside, what is that going to do for me? It's all about connecting with nature realistically, because mentally I'm in my own bubble, but outside is nature and I need to connect with nature a little bit more. We all need to realistically. And then the friendship aspect. If you're so ingrained in doing things by yourself, you are not going to make those connections. And I still have my best friend. We've been best friends for 12 going on 13 years. It's been the two of us. We've had other friends come and go, but we've stuck with each other because we have this dynamic that's flowing. We can always reach out to one another. There's not this judgment with us. Sure, there's hard conversations. Sure, like I'm sure she'll go to her parent and be like, what the heck is she doing? I know I've done it with mine. But realistically, it's healthy for us. It's a healthy dynamic, it's a healthy boundary, and you need to establish those. I need to establish going outside of my comfort zone, outside of myself, being one with nature at times. Just like my mom told me to go do with my dog, go take him on a walk. Because if he's not going to get exercise, who else is going to give it to him? It's all about connecting with your friends, and it's all about connecting with your mental stability, really.
I love that. And even though small bits of isolation can be good for reflection, it's so important this day and age, especially with social media that serves as both a blessing and a burden. It's easy for us to, live behind a screen and not connect. So that's a great way to view free flowing health. Get out there, get your feet into the sand, into the grass,
Yes.
and connect with nature, connect with human beings, and develop true and real relationships that can last over time. Last thing I just want to touch on, any advice you give to any parents perhaps that are dealing with kids that might be showing and displaying some symptoms of what you went through as a child? How can they identify that maybe their child has a learning disorder, and what can they do? What are the first steps that they can take to ensure that they get the proper care and attention, even if it's just them implementing something at home?
I would definitely say give yourself a break because parents as a whole, they're under so much scrutiny and stress from society and just themselves. They put themselves through so much. Being able to give yourself a break, maybe enroll them in lots of libraries, do children activities. Maybe drop off your children to the library and see how they're interacting with other students or other kiddos. Maybe see if they pick up a book. If they're not picking up a book, maybe you pick up a book and you have to do like an evening reading with them. And if they're struggling to understand words or like, why is that happening? And they're not asking questions, maybe that's when you take out pen and paper and you let them be creative because you're never going to fully know unless testing's done. But at the same time, why don't you test them at home? Test them to see what you're noticing, what you're observing, and connect with their teachers. Email, be like, are you seeing what I'm seeing? This is what I see at home. That's what I do with the students I tutor. I really connect with their teachers. I reach out to them. I have one student that I've texted with. Okay, well, I've texted with the parent, I've texted with the student, or not the student, the parent and the teacher, and we're all working together. It's an active dialogue between us all. It really works wonders. The first step is you giving yourself a break. A parent needs to give themselves a break. They're under so much. They deal with those children every single day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's a lot. Being a parent's a lot. So you definitely want to prioritize your mental health too. But enroll them in something at the library. It's free. The library, you pay for it through taxes. It should never be charged realistically, because the township should fund it. Make sure you drop your students off or your children off there, and then from there, see what happens. See if they open up a book, see if they read, see if something's going on. If not, paper. see what the difference is between white paper and blue paper. If they stick to blue paper may help them more than white paper. It also may just be a color thing. The color blue is calming for our eyes. It really relaxes us. So that's another thing why it works so well with dyslexic individuals, because it calms us. It doesn't overstimulate us the way white does.
All great tips. I love it. You're speaking from personal experience. You're a beacon of hope, light, inspiration for anyone struggling, for parents listening to this. And I want to thank you for your time and your wisdom and your knowledge. How can people stay connected with you? How can they find you? How can they work with you one-on-one?
So I have a website. It's called Alexis, Alexis, Cuff, CUFF.com. And you can connect through there. I have a connect with me. You can see my work. You can see what I've done with my students, my thesis statements, grad school, what I really promote in the office. It's fun. I love it. It's a good time. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can just look up Lexi Cuff. We can connect that way if you want to make a personal connection or networking opportunity. I'm accessible. I'm everywhere and anywhere, unfortunately.
I love it. Cool. And we're going to link all that into the show notes. And once again, thank you for your presence. Thank you for your time. So lovely speaking with you. I'm excited for a future episode. Or do you have any last words before we end this?
No, it just starts with you. You are the person. You're a business. You're a brand. It starts with you.
You are the one that you have been waiting for. That's a Hopi prophecy. Love it.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We love you. And till the next time. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Free Flowing Health podcast. Your support means the world to us. Help us grow by leaving a positive rating and review. Make sure to subscribe, like, and share this podcast. If you'd like to stay connected, you can find me on social media at Free Flowing Health or visit my website directly, freeflowinghealth.com. Wishing you a happy, healthy, and fulfilling life. Till the next time.
This podcast is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, health, or professional advice. We are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from the use of this podcast. This podcast is not intended to replace professional or medical advice. Views and opinions expressed by the guest are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the view of the host or the Free Flowing Health team.